it is. Go ahead, Allan.
Welcome to Update Brazil. Today we have Trevor again. My connection is not that good, so if I have some calls here, you guys can count with Jeff Nyquist and Trevor.
Good, okay. Thanks, Allan. How are you?
Thank you, Allan. Yeah, we have Trevor Loudon. I'm Jeff Nyquist, and we're going to be discussing the transition and different things about the post-election period. Trevor, I was asking you, you know so much about the communist connections of different people. Jill Stein, who's initiated a recount in 3 states, can you tell us a little bit about what you know about her background?
Well, look, I know that obviously the Green Party is largely controlled in this country by Trotskyists and some Maoists and socialists, and Jill Stein has, you know, attended the Socialist Scholars Conferences, which are basically done by Democratic Socialists of America, which is affiliated to the Socialist International. So Jill Stein is extensively part of the Marxist network in this country, and you have two basic sort of streams in this country: the left that supports the Democratic Party and the left that doesn't support the Democratic Party. And Jill Stein has always worked with that far left element that does not support the Democratic Party, but yeah, which tends to be more of a Trotskyist element, and that's where she comes from.
Interesting, Trotskyist. I noticed it made a little bit of a splash when she tweeted about Fidel Castro's death last week. She made the comment that Fidel Castro was a great fighter for justice against empire, I think was her comment. And of course, I think that kind of gives her away as being on the far left. It's funny, so she claims she's not doing this to change the outcome of the election or to spite Trump, yet she's only challenging states that Trump won or is ahead of him.
Well, look, what the plan of the left is to destabilize and delegitimize the Trump administration. You know, in the next coming year, I think you're going to see mass protests in the streets. You're going to see cities standing up for standing against Trump over the issue of, sanctuary cities for illegal immigration. I think you're going to see Trump challenged in every single direction. And what they're doing right now is setting the stage to make him appear illegitimate. That's why they're playing the Trump did not win the popular vote mantra. He won by the Electoral College, but not the popular vote. That's why they're challenging these elections, because if the whole narrative is the system is rigged, Trump is not the legitimate president, therefore we are right to stand against him, therefore we are right to disobey the law, therefore we are right to create civil disobedience and even acts of violence and terrorism. So the fact that Ms. Stein was in Russia not too long ago, and the Russians are experts at destabilization and clearly want to destabilize this country, I think that's no coincidence.
Yeah, destabilization, that's an interesting thought. And of course, the scene of having so many people and young people here, they were letting people out of school and excusing them from school if these are school children, underage kids, if they would go out and protest. And you have more violence. What really kind of surprised me is the violence from the left. There was a guy's house, I think it was in the Midwest. His house was burned down, and his family just barely escaped because he had an American flag and a POW flag and another flag outside of his house. And they think it was a Black Lives Matter group that did this. So, I mean, where it used to be maybe in the old South back in the 30s or 40s or 50s, the KKK that was burning crosses and terrorizing people, now the left is actually taken to doing this it seems.
Yeah, look, I follow the left-wing media extensively, and they are gearing up for violence. There's no question of this. And if you look at the Black Lives Matter movement, if you look at the big standoff that's happening in North Dakota right now over the Dakota Access Pipeline, where American Indians are trying to shut down this important piece of energy infrastructure, that is completely controlled and led by a woman called Judith LeBlanc, who is a leading member of the Communist Party USA with extensive ties to the Palestinians. She is, I've got a photo of her getting her hand kissed by Yasser Arafat. She works with the Palestinian ambassador and appears in the UN at a regular basis, you know, supporting the Palestinian cause. The Black Lives Matter movement has extensive ties to both the Russians and the Palestinians through the Freedom Road Socialist Organization and the Workers' World Party. And all of these groups are working together right now and gathering their forces, A, to oppose, to create havoc at the inauguration of President Trump next year, then to create ongoing violence and disruption right throughout the year. Like at Ferguson, for instance, a couple of years ago, where a young black man was killed by a policeman. That's the heartland of Freedom Road Socialist Organization. They brought 10,000 people from out of state to riot and create mayhem and burn shops and businesses during that time. So you've got the Ferguson, you've got Occupy Wall Street, you've got the Standing Rock standoff up in North Dakota right now, all of which have been violent to some degree. And all of these people are working together in the anti-Trump movement, and they have connections directly back to the Palestinians and the Russians, and also to Muslim Brotherhood front groups in this country. So you're really getting ready for a perfect storm of potential of outbreaks of violence in this country. Probably that's something we haven't seen since the 1970s.
Wow. So now you mentioned the Wall Street, I'm sorry, the movement that tried to shut down Wall Street.
Yeah, Occupy Wall Street.
Occupy Wall Street. You mentioned Occupy Wall Street, and that fascinates me because, you know, I think we had the impression that that kind of petered out or it failed. But what you're saying seems to suggest that this movement was kind of, it was a test pattern before, but it's been building, and now it's ready to do something more.
Well, look, the same people who are involved in Occupy Wall Street were the leaders of Black Lives Matter, are actively involved in Standing Rock, and have actively been involved in the riots before the violence before the election, the post-election riots in Portland and other cities, and are now gathering forces to oppose Trump's inauguration and to create mayhem through his first year of office. You know, they want to tie him up so much that he cannot get any of his agenda through. They want to create rebellions around the country. And these are the same people, the same groups of people tied to the Cubans, to the Palestinians, and the Russians. And if you just watch Russia Today, the Russian propaganda station, they are encouraging all of these movements and people, and having these people on their channel to discuss these issues.
So the Russians are openly on their television channels supporting these communist controlled. I mean, you would say these movements are communist controlled.
Look, 100%. You know, Black Lives Occupy was communist and anarchist controlled. Black Lives Matter was completely controlled by the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, a Maoist group, with help from the Workers' World Party. And now the Standing Rock is a combination of Freedom Road, Workers' World Party, Communist Party USA, and other groups. And all of them are working together in the anti-Trump movement, and all of them are working together to inauguration and create havoc after that.
So let me try to clarify. what's happening now is the communists see Trump's election as an opportunity to mobilize their people to say, look, the Americans just elected a Nazi or a reactionary, whatever they want to call them. And it's time to hit the streets. It's time to really fight hard for what we believe. And they've been spreading their poison through the school system, through the universities, so that more and more people are confused about what the truth is, and they believe this stuff, and they don't believe in the Constitution of the United States anymore, that a person who's elected president needs to be respected. And so they're just going to disrupt the system, basically.
Yeah, the whole idea is that the president is a racist. He is a fascist. The system is fascist. The election was rigged. The president is illegitimate, and the people must take to the streets to to restore justice and freedom. That is the message that's been promoted to the Black communities, the Latino communities, the student communities, and all of this is being coordinated by the communist movement in this country, all of it. And with help, I must say, from certain Muslim Brotherhood front groups as well, which they really overlap extensively with the communist movement. And it's clear, there's clear connections back to Cuba, to Palestine and Russia on this.
Yeah, that's interesting. The RT connection, if the Russians gave up communism, why would they be supporting communist groups now in the United States, especially when they pretend openly? I mean, this is what interests me, that Putin and the Russian government, they announce that Trump won the election and they applaud in the Duma and so on. They pretend like they like Trump, but they don't like Trump, do they?
No, look, well, the Russians have been playing a double game for some years now. In Europe, you see this. They support the pro-Islamic immigration hard left, the French Communist Party and all of these groups. And then they support the anti-immigration hard right, the National Front and these groups. So they're playing both sides. And you see this in America too. They had a conference in Moscow last year where they had members of the Workers' World Party, but also members of the Texan Independence Project and other groups, sort of neo-Confederate, sort of Ku Klux Klan affiliated type of groups. So they had both of these ends of the political spectrum, the racist collectivists and the non-racist collectivists working together in Moscow to basically, these people are supposedly enemies, but they have them at the same conference working together to basically stir up trouble in the United States, to destabilize the system. And you saw that in the Occupy movement, where you saw the hard left working with elements of the Ron Paul movement. Some of the Ron Paul people were in the Occupy movement because they have been fed this Russian propaganda line that America is the leader of the New World Order and Russia is there to liberate us and set us all free. And Russia is the bastion of Western Christianity, which will save us from the Islamic hordes. So the Russians have got both sides. They've got the Nazi element and they've got the communist element, and they are merging them together against the middle class, against the American constitutional patriots, to basically create trouble.
And if they can cause a war, a civil war, a conflict, and if you imagine that if they're cooking up both of the sides in the conflict, they're sort of in control of the cooking process of the pot. And do you think that they intend to cause an actual civil war if they can in Europe, Western Europe, or the United States?
Look, I don't think in America they would push it to the point of civil war at this stage, because that could spin out of control and who knows what might happen. But they will massively destabilize the country and impoverish the country and set the stage for a democratic administration in 4 years' time, probably led by someone like Elizabeth Warren, maybe Julian Castro from San Antonio. It'll probably be a woman Latino ticket. And basically aim to bounce back. And if they can get the White House one more time, basically the hard left will be the permanent government, because they will use immigration amnesty to massively expand their voter base. You know, giving amnesty to 10 to 40 million Latinos who vote 80% Democrat, you know, you can see the consequences of that. Plus, they will increase Islamic immigration from the Middle East. So, very narrow window of opportunity in this country to actually set the left back. And it does hearten me that Mr. Trump wants to make Jeff Sessions, for instance, the Secretary of Justice, the Attorney General, and he's got some good people around him who seem to understand the consequences here and seem to understand the forces arrayed against them. So we're heading for a very, very interesting time in American politics, I think.
Well, I saw a little video of Andrew Breitbart that's been a clip on YouTube lately, in which he basically is telling a journalist, it appears, he's saying that we intend to win, that we are fighting you, John Podesta, and we intend to win. And this was shortly before Breitbart's death. And Steve Bannon, who was very close to Breitbart, is now Trump's strategist. And I think he said similar things, that they are playing this to win. They're very serious. They have a kind of larger vision. And there was a very interesting piece in the Hollywood Reporter about Bannon. It was an interview with Bannon. I don't know if you saw it.
No,
but
no.
Bannon said a number of things that were extremely interesting. What he said, for example, was that the working class in the United States, the elites of both parties, had turned their backs on them, and the Trump strategy was to win the working class back, and by saying, look, we're going to look out for you. We care about what's happening to you, and the idea of bringing in illegal aliens to replace you, you know, sort of as the proletariat that the left wants, is not going to happen with us. And it was interesting because this guy has thought things through very well and has thinking that goes pretty far forward into the future. Do you have any thoughts on Bannon? And
Yeah. Well, look, he's an economic nationalist. You know, America first, and rebuild the American infrastructure, rebuild American industry, rebuild the American middle class. And all of those things I have to support. You know, this is the elites of both parties. You know, the left has wanted to open the borders and flood the country with illegals to basically dilute the middle class in this country and create a new proletariat which will vote for them. And the elites of the Republican Party have wanted lots and lots of cheap labor to you know, staff their factories and drive wages down and make greater profits for themselves. So the American working class can see it's been screwed by both factions, by the leadership of both parties. So Bannon was very, very clever, and Trump was very clever to reach out to the working class of Pennsylvania and Ohio and Wisconsin and Minnesota and places like this, to say, look, yeah, exactly as you say, you've been ignored, you've been betrayed, you've been sold down the river, and we're going to put you first. And so if Trump can actually do the stuff he wants to do, if he can close the borders, seal off immigration, you know, lower the tax burden, lower the regulatory burden, open up the energy fields and get American businesses working again and employing people again, he will be a two-term president and he will turn the country around. And the left understands this. They are absolutely freaking out at how much of their taken for granted union worker base that they lost to Trump. And they are hell-bent on revenge and hell-bent on making it impossible for Trump to carry out his agenda, which will then disillusion Trump's working base, which they think they can recapture in 2020 to bring the Democrats back into power. So the strategy is they understand how dangerous Trump is to their agenda, how much good Trump could do for this country, how he could woo the working class base away from the left and the Democrats. And they're freaking out, and they're doing everything they can to make sure Trump cannot carry out his agenda.
So basically, it's like sabotage. They're sabotaging.
Sabotage, yeah. They are sabotaging Trump as much as they can. They'll try and hold up his appointments. They'll try and Well, right now they're demonizing. The whole left is intent on demonizing Steve Bannon. You know, he's a racist. He's an anti-Semite. He's a part of the alt-right, which, is a fascist movement, etc. And so he has been demonized, and then they'll go after Jeff Sessions, and then they'll just keep on demonizing every one of Trump's appointees or advisors or whatever. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party wants to make Keith Ellison the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, a man who has worked with the Maoists, was a member of the Nation of Islam, was elected with the help of the Communist Party USA, has written for the Communist Party's newspaper, has held several meetings in the home of the leader of the Minnesota Communist Party, Erwin Marquette, who was paid to his Hajj, his pilgrimage to Mecca, was paid for by the Muslim American Society, a Muslim Brotherhood front group. This is the man they want to lead the Democratic Party. So you can see a huge polarization taking place here. The left has doubled down. The Democrats' reason we lost the election because we weren't progressive and socialist enough. Hillary Clinton was too much in the middle. We are doubling down and going way to the left. They're rallying the progressive forces, and they're weaponizing them and aiming them directly at Trump and his agenda. So you're seeing a real deep polarization happening here, and a more polarized since the Civil War, in my opinion. And the left has absolutely no qualms about committing acts of violence if they think they can get away with it.
Now, that's very interesting what you said just now about the Democratic Party moving to the far left. Is this really a workable strategy? And are Democrats expressing dismay at this movement to the left? Are Democrats, do you think, some going to leave the Democratic Party?
Look,
this is too radical.
Well, that may happen. You can see some of the Democrats' Jewish base particularly deserting the Democrats. But right now, they've really abandoned caution. They've thrown caution to the wind now. Their strategy is clearly left-wing, hardcore, and confrontational. And they're not really caring about the middle right now. They want to rally their base and unite their base against Trump. And that is their thinking right now. To hell with what's going to happen to the people in the middle, because they think if they can destroy Trump, there will be no choice for the people in the middle but to back them. If they can create enough disillusionment with Trump, they think they can be the left-wing pole that will win the country over. Whether that's a flawed or a good strategy, I don't know. But the Democratic Party, I don't think can help itself any longer. There are no moderates left in the Democratic Party now. Not at the senior levels. None at all.
That is fascinating. If Hillary Clinton won the election, we wouldn't see this open move to the left.
No.
If it wasn't for them making this Trump into the big bad wolf, so to speak.
That's right. The left would have used Hillary to infiltrate the Democratic Party further, to push her in the right policy direction. They would have pressured her, but you wouldn't have seen the absolute vitriol and hatred that's coming out of them now. In the first couple of days after the election, the left had several crowdfunders up to hire a hitman to take out Donald Trump. They've all been taken down now. There was at least 8 of them that we saw online. GoFundMe, etc., to hire hitmen to take Donald Trump out. So I read their literature. They are absolutely vitriolic. They thought they had this election in the bag, and they've abandoned all reason and all calmness, and they are building up for some pretty heavy stuff.
So the surprise outcome of the election for them, which was a surprise and a shock to them, has kind of caused them to expose themselves for who they really are.
Yeah, there was a big debate before the election. You know, they were not happy about Hillary. You know, you had the Bernie movement, which was much more openly socialist, and it managed to capture and Keith Ellison was part of that, and that managed to capture the policy platform of the Democratic Party. And so they got their, minimum wage increases. They got all their policies onto the Democratic Party platform, but they were not happy with Hillary Clinton. Even, they could see she's corrupt. They regard her as a neoliberal with too much ties to big business, etc. I regarded her as a communist, but to the communists, she wasn't communist enough.
Yeah.
So they were willing to unite as long as they could win the election, and then the left was going to finish the takeover of the Democratic Party and force Hillary Clinton to the left. That was the plan. And they were all very confident it was going to happen. The polls were going their way. They thought, well, look, we can hang on, we can unite, we don't like her, but we're halfway, we're 3/4 of the way to taking over the Democratic Party. We'll finish the job under Hillary. And everything fell to pieces on election night. And they were just shocked. So now they think, now the faction, the Bernie Sanders faction has won. This courting the neoliberals was a failure. We weren't progressive enough. We couldn't unite the base enough. We couldn't get the young people out. The blacks didn't vote for us in sufficient numbers. Therefore, we have to double down on the left. And the Democratic Party is just going full on into this scenario now, and the far left that wouldn't normally support the Democrats, all of them are uniting now against Trump. Trump is the Adolf Hitler, to them. He is Hitler incarnate, and they are going to do everything they can, and that will include violence to take him to destroy his agenda and rebuild their base.
Now let's talk a little bit about Trump's appointments and how Trump is going to react to all this, how he's going to handle it once he gets in. He actually, when he nominated here yesterday General Mattis to be defense secretary, he referred to him as Mad Dog Mattis, the closest thing to Patton that we have. That kind of proud use, and then the media was putting these. I heard National Public Radio had this a bit about Mattis, and they had Mattis on tape down at the Marine Corps base down in San Diego County, telling the recruits that it was really fun to hunt the Taliban, that hunting and killing these guys was fun. And of course, the left was, the liberals, they were just all shocked about this Nazi being defense secretary. But this is a hard-edged administration, isn't it? This isn't going to be even the Ronald Reagan administration. It's not going to be the kinder, gentler America that George H.W. Bush introduced, is it? No,
look, with one exception, I would say, all the appointments so far have been in the right direction. Mattis is Secretary of Defense. Jeff Sessions, obviously, is Secretary of Attorney General. The left are terrified of what he's going to do to the voting rights, on the voting rights issue. He's going to roll back the political correctness in the Justice Department and clamp down on illegal immigration and sanctuary cities. Trump is putting all the people in place that I would put in, or probably you would put in, if we wanted to turn this country around. The only one that concerns me so far is Elaine Chao, Secretary of Transport, because she has an extensive background with the communist Chinese. She's married to Mitch McConnell, the leading senator in the US Senate. And as I think we discussed earlier, Jeff, I think the logic for that is Trump wants big infrastructure projects to get people working, and it's very helpful if he has the leadership of the Senate on side for that, to get the money, to get the legal structure through to do that. But by the same token, I am very concerned about Elaine Chao. I wish she wasn't in there. I don't regard her as a trustworthy person at all. But I have to say that every other appointment of any note so far has been very much on the right side of the ledger. And these are people who, as you say, want to make a difference. These are not time servers. These are people who understand the security, understand where America is, where America needs to go, and the threats against America. Even General Michael Flynn, who I had concerns about because of his little sojourn to Russia as Trump's security advisor, people around him have told me that that Flynn is very aware of the danger of the Russians, very aware of the dangers of radical Islam. So I'm prepared to give the benefit of the doubt on that one.
Yeah, and
we'll
they say Mattis also is very, very worried about Russia.
Yeah, well, I can well imagine. And isn't it about time American armed services were led by General Patton again? Isn't it about time they were allowed to actually shoot back against their enemies and fight wars to win? Wouldn't that be a good thing for America? Wouldn't that be a good thing for the free world? So I applaud that. And as you can see, the liberal media is just going ballistic about it, because they don't want America winning wars. They want America in retreat. America's the bad guy. America's the bad cop in the world to them. So this is like putting J. Edgar Hoover in charge of the army, or Patton or Pershing. It's driving them nuts. So I congratulate Trump for doing it.
Yeah, it's quite something to see people of this kind being put into high office. I don't think even Reagan put as many people that were this far to the right into high government slots to this extent. Now we do have yet to see who he's going to pick for Secretary of State, and of course we have for the CIA director Mike Pompeo, and we were discussing before the show.
Pompeo is excellent.
Yeah, I was been reading his Benghazi report that he did with Congressman Jim Jordan, and I tell you, that is quite a report. I mean, it's really excellent, and the way it describes the Benghazi situation, the Benghazi episode, and how the Obama administration covered up, how the Democratic members of the committee did not try to get at the truth, but tried to block the committee's efforts to find the truth. It is really refreshing to see it stated so plainly what's really going on. So I'm hoping. I don't know that Pompeo, as head of CIA, will get anywhere with the CIA bureaucracy. I think we'd be better served to eliminate the CIA and start over and recruit a new agency, because I'm not sure that it does more harm than good. But we'll see what happens. In the FBI and the Justice Department, we've seen some very dismaying things during the election campaign from the Justice Department. The failure to prosecute Hillary Clinton for what were illegalities, for what other people lost their jobs or got put into jail for. A kind of double standard. We've heard reports of this about the Justice Department in the past. We know that the FBI has been politicized to some extent at the higher levels. If with Jeff Sessions being such a tough law enforcement person being put into the Justice Department, do you see a major battle there?
Yeah, look, absolutely. The whole Justice Department is really well taken over by the left at the senior levels. The FBI has been politicized. The CIA has always been penetrated and is very liberal in culture. So, there is going to be a battle, and it heartens me that Trump seems to see this by appointing such tough people to handle it, because you could not do any of this with wimps. because they will be compromised straight away. They will just give up. So I expect to see a purge in the CIA. I expect to see a purge in the FBI and a huge purge in the Justice Department. That is essential. Trump will not be able to get any of his agenda through unless he does that. So it heartens me to see that he's appointing people who have the moral fortitude and the testicular fortitude to actually do that. So
now, yeah, it is fortitude. Yes, courage. It takes courage. I saw one thing that made me realize. I don't know if you saw the Al Smith dinner on
yes,
YouTube.
I did. A friend of mine wrote the jokes for it, but yes, I did see it.
Is that right? Well, let me tell you something. The courage to stand up before that group and to say those things in front of those people. I mean, I have not seen a public figure in politics who has such guts as this guy. I mean, such nerve. I mean, really, nerves of steel. It's just, you don't necessarily agree with everything he does, but you have to hand it to him. He's got something that I don't think anybody I've seen in American politics in my lifetime.
Well, yeah, and you've got to give him full credit for that, because he says things that you're just not allowed to say. That it's just, it's like belching in church or something, it's just, you can't do these things. And he has done them. He doesn't seem to have any concerns about doing it. And the people love him for it. So, excuse me. So that's really stoked the populism around him. That's really fired people up. When he said in the last debate, or the second to last debate, when he said, when Hillary Clinton, when I'm the president, I will appoint a special investigator to look into your case. People cheered. Now, he's backed off that so far, but from what I gather, the investigation into the Hillary Clinton Foundation is still ongoing. And foreign governments are involved in this, so we still may see this happen. I think what Trump should have done over that is just said nothing. This is a Justice Department call. We're going to leave it to the Attorney General to decide this. That would have been the wiser course of action, I think. But look, you got to hand it credit to him. He does say the things that need to be said, and he should be fully supported for that, because I seriously did not think he'd win the election. I thought he would lose it by a small amount. I thought the vote fraud would be enough to tip him out. He's got there by some miracle. And maybe we should treat it as a miracle and just get behind him and make sure we use this opportunity we have been given to turn this country around. And by turning this country around, we're going to help countries like Brazil. We're going to help the European countries who are trying to shake off the slavery of the EU. We're going to help liberty revolutions all over the planet. That's what I hope to see come out of this.
One of the vulnerabilities of our free system is the fact that the central government, and I think it's true in all Western countries, the central government can be infiltrated and taken over by left parties with an agenda to plunder the economy of the country and to divvy up the plunder among special interest groups. And those groups don't just merely include, minority groups, but also big business groups, which become corrupted by the prospect of the plunder that they're going to get. Do you think that we now, maybe with Trump, have a way out of this problem with his stand against profiteering?
Well, I certainly hope so. And I was worried about the recent thing he did with Carrier, the air conditioning company that was going to move to Mexico. Trump went and had a discussion with them. They decided to stay in the country. And that was a very popular move. People loved that because it kept jobs in America. But I prefer the executive branch to keep out of business. And that's the message I want. The executive branch shouldn't be playing favorites or doing deals. The executive branch should be creating an environment can only succeed by providing a service or a good competitively, and by peeling back the government so the free market can operate properly. So I see a little bit of a danger there that Trump might fall for that kind of line. But I know there are plenty of people around him who don't, some of his economic advisors are top notch, and they want to see a real return to an open free market in the country, but I would say probably with some form of protection, tariff protection or whatever, so that American industry can rebuild and is not subject to the unfair competition of countries like China, etc., who basically dump their goods onto the American market to disrupt the economy. So I see some good points. I think he'll go in the right direction, but I just hope he can resist the temptation to inject himself into bullying or coaxing certain businesses to do certain things. That's the possible danger I see with him.
Yeah, of course, the situation with the trade with Mexico and China, for example, most notoriously lowering the value of their currency to get an unfair trade advantage, to knock out American businesses. The minute we got a free trade agreement with Mexico, they devalued the peso. The Chinese are notorious at playing this game. And of course, I think if Trump was merely reassuring the business people, look, you're not going to go out of business. Don't worry. We're going to pass a legislation to protect your business against the unfair trading practices of these other countries. And this raises the next question I have for you.
Well, if Trump was just doing that, I'm fine with it. And I hope that is what he was doing.
Yeah. My next question to you is about how Trump will get along with Congress. Now, we have Paul Ryan was reelected as Speaker of the House. And of course, after the election day, Paul Ryan, who had been rather standoffish about Trump, was suddenly singing Trump's praises before the TV cameras. And it was really quite a sight. Do you think that this Republican Congress is kind of been sobered into really cooperating with this president, or are they going to try to undermine him?
No, I think they have been sobered. I think there's enough people who are already pro-Trump in there to make a substantial block. And the fact that he won them the election against all the odds and is clearly got the people on his side, or a large chunk of the people on his side, I think will calm down people like Paul Ryan. And obviously the move to make Allan Chow the Secretary of Transport was designed to smooth things over with Mitch McConnell. There's a negative side of that, but there's a positive side of that. So I think the Congress will be pretty good, especially and the only battle I see might be over Obamacare. And the fact that he has made Tom Price, the congressman from North Carolina, wants to make him the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Now, Tom Price has been the best advocate in the House for completely repealing and replacing Obamacare. So that he will be there doing that. I'm just a bit worried that Trump may try and keep the pre-existing conditions clause and some other aspects of Obamacare. It's got to be completely repealed. So the fact he's put Tom Price there, that's great. And if he can keep that going and really repeal and replace Obamacare legitimately, he won't have Ted Cruz on his case in the Senate. Because if he doesn't really go after Obamacare properly, Ted Cruz will make a stand in the Senate. And he will be able to rally some people at least behind him. But if Trump does what he says he's going to do, and he's putting the right people in place so far, I think the Senate and the Congress will be pretty darn compliant. I think they'll be pretty much behind him.
I do have the feeling that even more than Reagan, that this President-elect Trump is going to try to make those promises, that he really believes these things, because he's the kind of person that says what he thinks, even if he thinks people are going to hammer him for it, he says it. And that's the one thing that I get from this.
Yeah, well, I think
similar feeling?
Yeah, and I think you're exactly. He will try. He will definitely try to do. He has put the right people in place so far. He's making the right moves. I think Trump is very much concerned about legacy. You know, he's a man of 70 years old. He's built his own personal empire. You know, he's very much into putting his name on things. You know, he likes to have his name out there. There's no question about that. And I think he wants to go down in history as a president who actually did what he said he was going to do. The president who actually turned America around. I think he's got a lot of his own ego invested in that. I think he's got a lot of personal commitment invested in that. So, yeah, I think he will try damn hard to do that. And it's up to us to help create the conditions where he can do that, and to keep the radical left at bay who will try and stop him doing it. But yeah, I think his personality, his ego, his own basic patriotism will, and his just damn the consequences speech patterns will put him on the right track to actually achieving real changes for this country.
Yeah, I think that may be the case. Well, Trevor, it's looked like we're coming close to the end of the show, and I guess you have to go pretty soon. Do you have any final thoughts about the process now? I mean, we're now a month and some weeks, a month and 2 weeks practically from inauguration. What do you?
Well, can I just do a little bit of shameless self-promotion for just a second?
Please.
Look, as you know, I have the movie out, The Enemies Within, which is exposing the communist, socialist, Muslim Brotherhood people leading the Democratic Party, but it's now available on Amazon Prime. So any of your Brazilian watchers, they want to see the movie, you can go to Amazon Prime and look at just go to The Enemies Within movie, and they can see it on right there.
Amazon Prime. Oh, fantastic. I'm a Prime Amazon. So definitely nice. Of course, I have a copy of it, and it's brilliantly done. It's fantastic. I mean, it's really something everybody should see. There's no doubt.
Yeah, well, I think in your Brazilian South American watchers may like to take advantage of that opportunity, because I think the same principles you see applying in America are very much what's playing out in Brazil right now, with the communists versus the freedom lovers, and the battle that's going on in that country. I see in America, I see the media doubling down and attacking Trump at every opportunity, trying to take the joy and happiness out of the inauguration. I see the radical left doing everything they can, but I see the patriots, rallying to support Mr. Trump. There's going to be huge attendance at the inauguration. It's going to be a very historic event. And I just think the polarization is going to increase. And if Mr. Trump can do what he says he's going to do, if he can defund the left, pass an look, I want to see him put out an executive order as soon as he's inaugurated to make the Muslim Brotherhood a designated terrorist organization. He can tell the State Department to do that. That will shut down CARE, ISNA, Muslim American Society, Muslim Students Association, etc. overnight. So, yeah, I see the left freaking out mega time up until the inauguration, and I see the patriots quietly gathering and getting their forces together, girding their loins for the battles to come. I see a lot of enthusiasm on our side of the fence for this coming administration. And so it's going to be interesting.
The Muslim Brotherhood, I've heard that before from somebody else, the idea of the Muslim Brotherhood being named a terrorist organization, given the connections that you said earlier about the proposed new head of the Democratic Party with having Muslim Brotherhood connections. Does that mean that he's going to be investigated? What are the implications?
Well, there are huge implications here, because, the Muslim Brotherhood is the parent of Hamas and Al-Qaeda, and even indirectly ISIS. So, but in America, they can operate freely through the Council on American Islamic Relations, the Muslim American Society, Muslim Students Association, and dozens of other fronts, which your congressmen work with extensively. So there has been a bill in front of your Congress that got 60 sponsors in this Congress to officially designate the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist group, just as Hamas is, just as Al-Qaeda is. Now, people are in jail in the United States. In the Holy Land Foundation trial, 5 Muslim activists were sent to long prison sentences for sending money to Hamas because Hamas was a designated terrorist organization. So that is going to have huge implications in the United States because CARE is a Muslim Brotherhood front. MAS is a Muslim Brotherhood front. So people who work with these organizations will be committing a crime. A lot of congressmen. That includes a lot of senators. So
Wow.
yes, there will be huge implications if this, and see, Donald Trump doesn't have to have a law for this. He can do an executive action, executive order that tells the State Department they have to put the Muslim Brotherhood on the list. Immediately, the Muslim Brotherhood in America is going to be just freaking out. I would say a bunch of their operatives will leave the country. I'd say a whole bunch of their front groups will close down, and the Justice Department will start coming after them. You'll see some very interesting things happen if Mr. Trump can do that.
Wow, that is incredible. Well, Trevor Loudon, my guest here on Update Brazil, and I want to thank you for joining us. And for the listening audience, click the I like button. Hopefully you won't click the I don't like button. And Trevor, thank you. And we lost Allan in Brazil, so our Brazilian audience, I wish you a good week, and we'll have another show next week. Until then, thank you, and good day. Have a good weekend.